Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Liverpool, and in a game which probably the game was the least most talked about thing going into the game. It was another frustrating result, a frustrating performance, particularly in the second half, and another game which, looking back, we could have done a lot of things differently and ultimately got a more positive result out for us. But obviously going into the game there was not really any talk about the game or what might come out of it or our top four chances. Obviously everything was about the Super League that got announced, and we were just unfortunately the first game after really everything got announced. And I'm not going to talk about it too much on this video. I did a whole separate video on my channel earlier today which you guys can see, where I went through what I thought some of the possible pros of the European Super League are, and what some of the kind of major cons are, and why people seem to be so emotionally invested in it not happening. So we won't talk about that too much. And obviously it was always going to be, that was always going to cloud the game going into the game, and so it was going to be difficult, one, as fans to really concentrate or be excited for or look forward to the game, but also from the players and managers' perspective as well. You know, having not been consulted or talked about in the build up to the game and into the build up to this decision about the Super League, they're very much in the same position as us as fans. You know, kind of outraged at the prospect of it, confused by what it means for them. And at the same time, you know, UEFA throwing around things like sanctions on players against playing in competitions and, you know, all this type of stuff. It's not I can't imagine it's a very easy position to be in, and particularly having to go and play a Premier League game, which, as it currently stands, is super important for our season, and a game that, you know, we could possibly look back on and gone, actually, those 2 points that we dropped today could possibly have made the difference in terms of helping us get the top four. But going into the game, the team was fairly static. A couple of changes in the team. At the back, Nat Phillips, who had what I believe is a hamstring injury. I don't think it's too serious from what the club reports and some of the media are stating about it, so hopefully he should be back for the Newcastle game on the weekend. But that meant that Fabinho had to then again drop back into the centre back position, and I think that we, after having Fabinho in the back for so long, we felt kind of fairly solid in things. And then when he went back into midfield, we realised what we missed from him when he sits in that midfield in terms of breaking up the play, giving that protection to the back two, which has allowed them to get so many clean sheets in the past couple of games. But obviously he was back in centre back, covering for Nat Phillips. In midfield, it was a midfield of Gini Wijnaldum, Thiago, and James Milner. Again, a very kind of workman-like midfield. I think Thiago was in the team and was starting purely because of his kind of control on the ball and being able to just jink past a man and play a pass forward under pressure, particularly against a side like Leeds, who, for example, were always going to be putting the midfielders in particular and the defenders under pressure. So having that player who can pop the ball around very quickly was going to be important. And then the other change coming up front, where we ended up going with Jota, Mane and Firmino, with Salah dropping to the bench. He didn't have necessarily the best game against Real Madrid in the week, and so I think Klopp was going into the game kind of thinking, one, he probably needs a bit of a rest. Two, he wasn't on top form in that game, and he knew that this time round he possibly may not get. We'd have to be fairly clinical with our chances, because that's exactly what we did. That's exactly what we weren't against Real Madrid, and he was ultimately proven right by that. First half panned out in a way that you would expect a Leeds game to pan out. You know, Leeds games are fairly, any game that Leeds participate in, right? Be it home or away, be it against a small team or a lower team. The Leeds games go the same way. They set out with the same intentions, the same philosophy, regardless of who they play with. Now, that's an admirable way of playing, and it's got them into some sticky situations this year, but it's also got them into some very positive situations, like we saw last week with their victory over Manchester City. What we did, I think, really well in the first half is we matched it. We matched their energy and pressure with our own energy and pressure, and it was kind of like, you know what, do you like the taste of your own medicine? And I really thought they struggled with it in the first half. They struggled trying to play out play out from the back because the midfielders were always pressing onto their midfielders, pressing onto Stuart Dallas, Calvin Phillips, not letting them get the ball and turn and play those balls out to the wingers, to Helder Costa, to Jack Harrison. And what it enabled us to do was really kind of win the ball back fairly high up the pitch and get those balls into Mane and Jota, enabling and getting them into very good positions. I think the thing that was frustrating, particularly during the first half an hour, was yes, we got into those positions, but like has been the case for so many games this season so far, we just weren't clinical. We didn't really force any real saves from Meslier, and we didn't look like we were going to really break the Leeds defence down and cause them, create some real chances and cause them real and proper concerns. But we were able to break the deadlock in the first half with a great ball. So one thing that became very clear throughout the half was that because they were man-to-man pressing and they were leaving one of our centre-backs as essentially the man that wasn't marked, that defender was able to stride forward with the ball. We saw that earlier in the first half when Fabinho was able to literally just run from the halfway line all the way into the box and ultimately get a shot away, which got blocked for a corner. But we kind of saw a bit of that for the goal as well, with Kabak having the ball, kind of seeing everyone kind of marked, and so therefore was able to step up into kind of almost like that deep lying midfield position, in which he was able to lay the ball off to Diego Jota, who was coming short there. And that little piece of movement of Kabak going forward, Jota coming and receiving the ball really helped just disrupt that bit of flow from Leeds, and meant that Luke Ayling was just a little bit off Diego Jota, which allowed Diego Jota to play a beautiful ball, a very Trent-like pass around the corner to Trent Alexander-Arnold, who was able to just nick the ball past the goalkeeper, and Sadio Mane had an open goal to knock the ball into, and that very much, I think, we deserved that in the first half, based on how we were playing and the intensity that we were playing at, without necessarily obviously really creating the chances, but we played really, really well. And I think going into half-time, we really deserved the lead. I think Leeds, obviously going into it, would have been very frustrated because they didn't really have much of the ball. The only chances they really had in the first half were from our mistakes, and I definitely think Bielsa would have drummed into them that there's a lot of improvement they could have made, and ultimately did make in the second half. And the second half started, I would say, for the first 10 minutes quite similar to how the first half had started off. We were winning the ball back fairly well. Diego Jota had a chance from a corner, which he arguably should have done better from. I had a free header from the corner. And it kind of seemed like the second goal was almost coming and inevitable, particularly in that first 5 minutes of the second half. But when it didn't come, I thought that maybe gave a little bit of confidence actually to Leeds, and they then started to grow into the game more and more as the second half went on. Alisson made 3 or 4 really good saves, like from very, very good chances from Leeds, and also Patrick Bamford going on and hitting the crossbar as well before they ultimately did get the equaliser in the 85th minute. And the thing that was, I guess, really frustrating about it was, well, if they had scored one of those chances earlier on, it would have given us a bit of time to figure out a way to then get back into the game. But ultimately, with the goal being so late in the game, it was too late for us to do anything. And credit to Leeds, I think what they did better in the second half was they were able to control the ball better when they did have it, so they were able to pass the ball around a bit better, and ultimately I think that was just down to being braver on the ball. When they got the ball, they were braver to take that extra touch, find that pass, play around us when we were pressuring them, rather than either trying to lump the ball long to Patrick Bamford or kind of panic and play the ball, play an unlikely pass. So that's where I think they did better, and ultimately it worked for them, right? Leeds are not a team that you say lack bravery, and they definitely showed that in the second half. They were really, really good, and on the contrary, we kind of fell back into our shell almost once they started putting on some pressure. Once we had that one goal, and it felt like once that first chance happened from Tyler Robertson and Alisson saved it, it felt like the players went into a mode of, okay, well, we've got a 1-0 lead. They're growing into the game. Let's try and protect this, rather than let's try and go out and get a second goal to try and make sure that we put the game to bed and that there's no chance for Leeds to come back into the game. But yeah, that very much wasn't the attitude the players ended up kind of taking, or what I observed at least that they took. And I think ultimately that cost us. And when they did score the header from the corner, it was a very good delivery in. All of their crosses from corners had been horrendous for the second half, and I think some of the Liverpool players possibly thought that it'd be another terrible cross, but ultimately it wasn't, and it was a very good cross in to the box from the corner, and headed well by Llorente. You could argue that the defenders could have done better, but I think that that was all about the delivery, and it was in the right position, and the defender, all he had to do was really get his head to the ball, and he was going to score. So yeah, yet another setback, frustrating draw in our chase for the top four, which as every game goes on now is looking less and less likely. Approximately 5, I think, or 6 Premier League games remaining for us, with Newcastle up next in the Premier League. Manchester United, you would say, looking at our remaining fixtures, is the only other team that is a huge team, but out of all the teams that we're playing so far, or that we've got left to play, only Crystal Palace have we beaten this season, and the likes of West Brom, Burnley, etc., who we haven't able to beat, we've still got to play those as well, where historically you'd say we're going to have no problems beating those teams, but based on how we played against them earlier this season, those are definitely not a given. And so with some of the other teams kind of also kind of dropping points, particularly West Ham, this could have been an opportunity for us, but alas, we didn't capitalise on that, and that was frustrating. I think the shout out to Klopp for this episode is very much going to be just the focusing on the football and leaving this Super League stuff to the side. I think one of the things, just a final thought on the Super League before I end of this episode, one of the things that Jamie Carragher said before the game, which really struck with me, is if we were in this position and the Super League existed, this game would mean nothing. And that really hit home for me, at least, and it really helped put things into perspective about what this Super League will change in terms of the competitiveness. But that's it for this episode, guys. Thank you all for listening, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.